Today is my bread making day here at the homestead. I want you to make it with me. Let's start off with what I'm using. This is an Oster Bread Maker. Now, a funny story, I actually purchased this at a garage sale and it cost me about $10. The person who sold it to me said that the heating mechanism didn't work properly, but I thought, why not give it a try? You could either use a bread maker and bake your bread all the way through with one of these units, or you can use a standalone mixer. I actually have a standalone mixer that I inherited. It's super old. Hang on a second, let me show you. Now this is my super old Sunbeam stand mixer, and you can tell by the brown color, I'm guessing it's probably from, I don't know, the late 70s. If you guys know anything about stand mixers, let me know down in the comments because I really don't know how old it is. It does come with the bread kneading paddles, but because it's so old, I have to really kind of turn the bowl as it's mixing, but I still use it for mashed potatoes. It comes out at Thanksgiving just to give it some honor, but other than that, we don't use it very much, and I'm not really willing to spend the money on expensive ones with all of the additional attachments, not yet anyway. So I'm gonna go back to using this $10 garage sale find in my bread maker. This was actually a recipe book that came with the bread maker, so they still had it. The very first step is to make sure you have a good greased bread pan. Now, we use cast iron for just about everything, and this is one of the Lodge bread pans, and we have two. I usually make 2 loaves at a time, but for the sake of the video today, we're just gonna do one. This is the Lodge seasoning spray. So I just like to spray that inside and make sure it has a good coating on it first. Then you're gonna want to start preheating the oven at about 350 and just leave your pan sitting on top of the oven so this can get nice and warm. While the oven heats up, I'm going to remove the basket that is inside the bread maker, and this is where we're just gonna easily dump all of our ingredients. So I'm gonna follow along because I always wanna make sure I'm doing this in the correct order. This girl has a lactose tolerant issue, and due to some other health issues, I have not drank cow's milk in probably about 12 years. We always drink coconut milk, almond milk, cashew milk, but we do purchase the dried milk, and we purchase these from My Patriot Supply. I will have a link to that down in the description. I am an affiliate with Patriot Supply, so anything that you purchase from there doesn't cost you anything, but I get a little bit of a commission for saying, hey, go to My Patriot Supply. But I really like using this because we can keep it in the refrigerator, it's never gonna go bad, and then I don't have to worry about having milk in the fridge. So I'm gonna take 2 tablespoons of this and I'm gonna add it to 7 to 8 ounces of water in a mason jar. This is room temperature water. It's been sitting out for a while, or you can really heat up your water, and having warm milk will actually help activate your yeast, making it rise quicker. So never use cold milk. And you can see it mixes up really easy, and there's a glass of milk. So I'm just gonna set that off to the side. And I'm gonna add 1 egg. And of course, it's a farm fresh egg. This is from one of my green Americana chickens. So I love having these colored shells. And don't crack it over your actual bowl unless you know you're not gonna get an eggshell in there. I've cracked enough eggs in my day. I usually don't worry about it, and it looks good. Now I'm gonna add a tablespoon of butter. My butter, leave out. We always use room temperature butter, and I already put a little slice there so I know what my tablespoons are. So that's another trick, is when you're leaving your butter out, before you pull the paper off, put your little marks on it with your knife, and then you always know where your tablespoon marks are without having the paper still on your butter. Now we're gonna add a tablespoon of sugar. This is an old, ooh, I have a scooper in here. This is the old-fashioned white bread. There are many different ways that you can make bread. You can make cinnamon bread, which I love to do. So I will actually add, instead of just regular sugar, I will add cinnamon sugar. And then once it's done mixing, I can flatten it out, put more cinnamon sugar on it, roll it back into your loaf, and then you'll have your spiraled cinnamon bread. There's a lot of different things you can do. You can be adding raisins in here. You can be adding cherries. You could do whatever you want if you want to flavor up your bread and make something a little different. Now I need 1 1/4 teaspoons of salt. And I usually do a teaspoon just with my regular salt shaker, and whatever overflows from the teaspoon. This is probably a really lazy way to do it, but I don't feel like getting out the really big box of salt. So I'm gonna go ahead and add that in. Now that my milk had a little bit more time to sit and dissolve, I'm gonna give it another little shake. And we're gonna pour that in. This is super easy. It's just dumping the ingredients into your bread maker container, and then we're gonna let the bread maker do the hard work. Now you wanna add your flour. Make sure you're using bread flour. If you want to mix in other types of flours like wheat flour, you can do that as well. Just know it might not rise quite as well. So if you do wanna use a wheat flour, you can do 2 cups of the regular bread flour and then 1 cup of the wheat flour. I have done that as well. So this is going to be 3 cups of the flour. So there's 1, 2, and 3. The most important part is your yeast. If you buy these strip yeast packets, keep them in your refrigerator. They will last a lot longer. They come usually in a strip of 3, and they're around $2, $2.50, depending on what the grocery store is at. We buy a couple different name brands. We've bought off name brands, and they all seem to work, but you'll want to make sure you're paying attention to the dates on the packets. They will have an expiration date on the back. If it is beyond the expiration date, you can still use it, but it might take a little bit longer for your bread to rise, or your bread might not rise at all, and then you've just wasted a whole bunch of ingredients. So we try and rotate our stock, but always have probably 2 or 3 of those strips in the refrigerator. We just tuck them inside the door of the refrigerator with our condiments. So what's really nice about these is these are pre-measured. So I don't have to worry about getting out a measuring spoon. This is going to be 2 teaspoons of active dry yeast. Because it's all measured out, I'm gonna put this on the top. We're gonna go ahead and put this back in, snap it in place. There we go. All right, now it's snapped in place, and you're gonna close your lid. This one, I could plug it in ahead of time and hit start and do all of that, but for whatever reason, because it's probably a $10 garage sale find, it wants to start as soon as I plug it in. And my oven just beeped, so it is preheated. Once it's plugged in, this one in particular has a whole bunch of different settings for regular bread, large bread, dark bread, French bread, sourdough bread. I don't care about any of that, because that is actually the heating and the cooking time. All I want it to do is knead my bread. I just want this machine to literally do the hard work for me. There's not gonna be any old-fashioned kneading here. I do know how to do it in case, there's a power outage and this guy doesn't work. So it's good to know how to do it, but it's also nice to have something like this that you can just walk away and let it do its thing. Once this goes through its kneading process, right now it's stirring the ingredients, and then it will bounce it around. Once that process is done, I only leave it in here for about 5 minutes to rise just a little bit inside the bread maker. Then we're gonna pull it out and add it to our bread pan. It's been about a half hour of a full process. We can take the bread out. This is a little bit warm, but like I said, my garage sale version doesn't heat up quite as well as it should. This is gonna be quite sticky, so I like to take a little bit of bread flour and put it on my hands as well as on my cutting board. I also have my bread pan that was sitting on top of the oven, nice and warm. Make sure when you grab it, if you're using these Lodge ones, that you are using your oven mitts. Now you're gonna pull your bread out, and it should come out pretty well. And you can see it's a little sticky, so that's why it's nice to have flour down on your cutting board, and you can get that sticky off of your hands. Make sure you're removing your little bread mixer from the bottom of the pan, and also make sure you're putting it in when you're first starting. I have done that many times where I've added my ingredients and it's not in there. So we're gonna get our hands powdery, and now you can see it's a little bit easier to mold and move around. Once we have this kind of worked through where I can touch it really well and not be sticky, I'm kind of doing a second kneading, but it's really not that difficult. I'm just kind of folding it into itself and getting that extra layer of flour on there. And I'm gonna pat some of the air bubbles out, then gently pick it up and plop it in. You can kind of push it into the corners if you need to. Then we have to let it rise naturally because we're not letting it rise in the bread maker. And this is another reason why we have our oven on, preheated. This was on top warming up as well. What I use is just regular cling wrap or saran wrap. And I'm gonna pull a piece out, and you just gently lay it over top of your bread pan. It doesn't have to stick to your bread pan. You just wanted to lay it over top. It's kind of like when we're gardening and we like that greenhouse effect. This is gonna help keep the moisture and the heat in this. Now we're gonna go ahead and place this back next to the stove and let it rise. Once our bread has risen above the baking pan, then we're gonna go ahead and stick it in the oven, and we'll let it bake for about 45 minutes, and we'll check it at that time to see if the inside is done. So with the power of editing, here's our bread. Homestead never sleeps, so I've been cutting up a ton of tomatoes to get this going so we can stew them down to make more tomato sauce, because the garden does not wait for anyone. You gotta multitask when you're doing these things, and it's a really rainy, overcast, kind of thundery day today. It makes the perfect day to do the inside kitchen chores. What I'm doing is using a spatula, which should be fine because I sprayed it. And I usually get a little bit of a flattened spot when I do this. This is always the tricky part, is getting it out. But we want to get it out as soon as we can. With the Lodge Cabin bread pans, they're really, really hot and they take a long time to cool down. So we don't want it to keep baking while it's just sitting and resting. Then I use this little tray, which is actually for your microwave, so it can handle the heat from the bread, and it's a really good way to get your air circulation all the way through so your bread can cool. And if you've seen any of my other home cooking, homesteading videos, I love these rubberized mats because you can wash them. They're so much better than these fabric ones that get disgusting and you end up having to throw them away because they just don't last. So these rubberized ones have been a godsend. Absolutely love them. Get yourself the ingredients you need to do this and either do it in a bread baking machine, knead it by hand, or if you have a stand mixer, you can knead it that way. Then let it rise, put it in the oven for about a half hour, and you have a beautiful loaf of bread, handmade and without all of the crazy preservatives. Now you're gonna wanna eat this pretty quickly. The best way to store it is after it has cooled off, put it into a Ziploc baggie and put it in your refrigerator, and that will help it last a little bit longer. I'm so glad you guys took this time to bake with me, and we'll see you on the next one. Okay, we're done.